Hi, everyone. My name's Carol Hollier, and I am the person who's going to lead this webinar. So I'm going to jump right in. I want to first give a little bit of an introduction about why I'm having this webinar and what IFAS publishing is and why we are working in the area of best practices for searches in the sciences of food and health. And so you may or may not be familiar with IFAS Publishing, but we are the publisher, the organization that produces FSTA, which is a database which is focused on the sciences of food and health. And we were created 50 years ago by a number of food science organizations who needed a reliable place for information. And of course, the information landscape has changed massively in the last 50 years, but we're still working in the area of providing really solid information for people working in this field. And we're not just working by creating the database, but we're reaching out to people to talk about how you can search effectively whether or not you have access to FSTA. And so that's what I'm going to do in this webinar this afternoon. Normally, I have a colleague who helps me with questions and so forth, but I do want to let you know that I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as I go along. So feel free to put any questions in the chat and I'll stop periodically and look and answer those. And also I want to let you know that I'm also very happy to follow up with you later if you have any questions. So I'm going to dive in. The first thing I want to do actually is go to a poll for you. If everybody could go to pollev.com/carolhollier785, and if you go into the chat, you'll actually see that I've put that in there as a link, so you can just click on the link and join this poll. Then you can show where it is that you're joining us today. So somebody's from Germany who can't get on the board, somebody's from Florida, maybe on the beach, somebody from Africa, from the south, very, very southern Africa, somebody from Spain. So I am in the UK, somebody else from the Netherlands, from Poland, from Spain. Oh, somebody from Catalonia also. Welcome, everybody. Oh, and somebody from Wuhan, China. I had the joy of being in Wuhan last November. So welcome. Oh, and from Lebanon? Truly international. Okay, I'm going to move the slides on to the next poll, which is just a quick question of what do you find most challenging about literature searching? So you can type anything into there. And again, if the poll's not working for you, feel free to put that in the chat, please. Oh, yes. The amount of information, that's a huge question, always. There's so much out there. The information is big now, choosing what's relevant, the bulk of it. There's a theme coming up here. There's a lot of information. So this is really, I think, one of the biggest challenges for searching today. When 50 years ago, FSTA started, it was probably the opposite. It was hard to find it, both because it wasn't available online the same way and because there just wasn't as much of it. So now we're facing new challenges. So thank you for participating in that. I'm going to move on into the bulk of my presentation. So I have a lot of information to convey. It's probably going to take me really until the top of the hour. And I may go a little fast, but again, don't hesitate to put any questions in that you have. So what I wanted to cover today is the purposes and complications of literature searches. And I need to clarify that this session is not about systematic review searching. So it has things in common with systematic review searching, but that is a very specialized kind of searching that you need to do. So this doesn't give you the training to conduct a systematic review. But what we will look at is the characteristics of a good search and then how you can build your strategy so that you are more likely to come back with results that give you a good search, or are the searches that you need, the results that you need, pardon me. And then we're going to look at how you appraise your results. And finally, we'll look at further resources to help you in your searching. So, why do people search? Well, there's a lot of different reasons that people search. So sometimes it's done in the context of a literature review. So every time a researcher embarks on new research, they will want to and need to find out what's been done before. So they conduct a literature review, which investigates the research that's already been done as it's been written up in the scientific literature. And so this enables a researcher to, first of all, check if the research that they're thinking of doing has already been done, explore new research methods. It highlights gaps in existing research. It allows you to demonstrate how your research fits in with existing research, existing evidence, and it also can help you identify flaws and biases in existing research. So overall, the purposes of a literature review is to provide the context for and justify your research. And to get a sense of how crucial this is, a study that was published not that long ago in the Lancet medical journal found that 12.5% of biomedical research done is actually completely redundant or unnecessary because previous research had already been done on the same thing. So it can be a waste of time and effort and funding. And inadequate literature reviews can lead to submitted papers being rejected for publication or needing to be revised heavily, so causing extra work. In a most extreme example, an insufficient literature review led to the death at Johns Hopkins University of a young and healthy study participant. The researcher had missed in his literature review information about the potential lethality of one of the substances he used in his trial, even though the harm of the substance had been well established in the 1950s. So in that case, he hadn't gone back far enough in his searching and had basically just relied on electronic resources. So not all literature searching, of course, is done for a full review. So, for instance, before conducting a full literature review, a researcher exploring a new area or idea might conduct a scoping exercise to get a sense of what information is out there and what research has been done in the area. And a literature searching is also a really useful and efficient way to learn about the terminology used and concepts related to your field. Yes, I will provide the reference for the Lancet study, but I think I'll have to follow up with that. So I'll get that to you later. It can also be a pinpointed information exercise. So you might be looking for a particular kind of information about a question or a substance or a process. So what patents have been filed related to 3D chocolate printing? What standards have been established for detecting adulteration of vinegar, or what risks are associated with different ingredients in a product you're developing. So depending on the purpose of your search, it will be more or less exhaustive, meaning that you will put more or less time into it. Some searches are incredibly exhaustive, those for systematic reviews, for instance. Systematic reviews are research studies of research studies that pull together all the studies that have been done on a question, and they often pull together their disparate results into a meta-analysis to draw an overall conclusion from the data. Researchers conducting systematic reviews would not only always search within a range of databases and search engines, but the authors would also reach out to researchers who had not actually published their research anywhere to ask to include the data in the review. They would find these researchers through gray literature, which includes things like conference reports, which might be found online, and in health-related fields, trial registrations. Most searches, however, don't need to be as exhaustive as that, and it's often sufficient to stick to the published literature to get an adequate overview of an area. So searches could be exhaustive, they could be exploratory, or they could, when a researcher already has a strong grasp of an area or a field, just be used for keeping up to date so that you know the new stuff that's published in an area. Or again, you might be seeking out a specific piece of information. But regardless of the purpose or extent of that's needed for the research, you always want to think about and comply with certain principles so that you can know that your research is sound and not skewed, and so that you're not making decisions on faulty information. Oh, apologies, I didn't move my slide at all there. Tried to be better about that. So we run into challenges, and people already noted at the start of the session that one of the big challenges is the quantity of information that's out there. And so in food science, this challenge is especially acute because in science as a whole, publication outputs are growing at about 3% per year. But in food science, it's actually growing at an average of 10% every year on average. And a sense of how much growth there is within this field is encapsulated by the fact that in the past 15 years, the number of institutions working in food science has actually doubled. So having so much information creates both challenges and opportunities. The opportunity is that there's lots of fantastic research available out there, but the challenge is that you need to find how exactly do you find the research that you need without drowning in the things that you don't need. Another challenge that we face is the challenge of quality. So there's a problem in the world of predatory journals. The example that you see on the screen is a spoof one where a researcher in ecology actually was tired of being pestered by predatory journals. And so he wrote this article called "What's the Deal with Birds?" The abstract starts out, "Many people wonder, what's the deal with birds? This is a common query. Birds are pretty weird. I mean, they have feathers." So it's just a completely spoof article, but it was published. He managed to get the APC fee waived. So the APC fee is a fee that comes with open access publishing, so where the author pays for it to be available. And so this is how predatory journals make their money, and it is money that is what motivates them to publish. But you'll see that the publishers who published this completely farcical article proudly say that they are indexed in these various information finding sources, including Google Scholar, including some of the more reputable ones are the Road. Washington State University probably isn't very happy about having themselves listed up there, etc. So another problem that happens with predatory journals, with quality, is just encapsulated in this example from Google Scholar, where through the indexing with bots, you can see that lunch menus are actually indexed as though they're a serious journal. So when you search Google Scholar and you get thousands, tens of thousands of results, a lot of them aren't actually relevant at all. And some of it is just pure garbage like this. So this fine piece of literature by Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, September breakfast menu, etc. So it's just clogging up and making the problem of the great quantity of information worse. So what is it that we're thinking about with good searching? The things that make a search good, I believe, are knowing that your search is efficient and knowing that your search is comprehensive within the parameters of your own needs. And also, you always want it to be reliable. So how is it that you can get there? I think it's fair to say that every researcher wants every search to be, for whatever purpose that they're doing, to be reliable and relevant. So to efficiently capture the most relevant and reliable information on their topic or question. But if you are searching for literature review, in order to comply with best practice standards, your search also needs to meet other criteria. So a good definition of a literature review is that it's a critical assessment of the literature relating to a particular topic. And a literature's review's goal is to identify, evaluate, and synthesize the existing body of evidence with as little bias as possible. With a literature review, you're gathering the literature, reporting research on a scientific question, and pulling it together and drawing conclusions from it. And the conclusions can go in different directions. So again, a systematic review, you can actually draw a new conclusion from all the compiled data together. But in most literature reviews, you're demonstrating that your research is embarking on in a new direction or has value because it's not been done before, and you're placing research in the context of what is known. So your literature review needs to be comprehensive. You need to know that you're not missing key information or research related to your question. It needs to be systematic. And so this is about the process you use to find the information in your review. By being systematic in your literature searching, you can be assured that your review is comprehensive. So systematic searching means that you will have looked in all the appropriate ways, in all the appropriate places to find valid and relevant research. So we'll look at the process for how you actually do this a little bit later. It also needs to be reproducible. And so this is important for yourself because you'll want to, near the end of a process of writing a literature review, to rerun all your searches to make sure that nothing significant has been published since the last time you looked. You can also do that by setting up automatic updates in the places that you search. But it can also be really important for others because having a reproducible literature search allows you to demonstrate convincingly how you got where you got with your searches and that your review is indeed systematic and therefore comprehensive. And finally, your review needs to be objective. And by this, we mean that having systematically and comprehensively combed the literature, which represents the body of existing knowledge on a question, you're sure to include all the relevant and valid results, whether or not they're convenient for you or not. Hopefully, it is unlikely that many people would deliberately skew or make non-objective a literature review. But if your literature searching hasn't been systematic and comprehensive, then it would be really easy and in fact likely that the review would be biased and thus inadvertently not objective. So that gives us a picture of what the finished product should be. But how do we get there? So I think it's becoming clear that being systematic and searching is the linchpin upon which a good literature review rests, because without being systematic, it's really difficult to be sure that your review is comprehensive. And without being comprehensive, it's impossible to know if a review is objective. But how do you actually run a systematic search? And it helps really immensely to use tools that have been built to help researchers search systematically. And it also helps if you step back and think about the tools that we use and what their primary purposes are and how they work, and also how you can work with them to get what you need out of them. So in order to understand how tools work and what the purposes are, it's helpful to think about the distinction between discovery and access. Because discovering information is finding out that it exists. So learning that there is an article that writes out research results, or a patent describing an invention or standard. And access is actually getting your hands on the full text of that article or patent or standard. So some tools are actually designed with discovery as their primary purpose, and other tools have access as their primary purpose. And then there's lots of discovery tools that are also set up to help with seamless or almost seamless access to the material you discover through them, which is a great thing, but I think tends to blur the distinction between discovery and access for lots of researchers. So the distinction is really key. But I think that many people don't really understand that there's a distinction, or don't think about the distinction, or realize that they're separate from each other. Access and discovery are separate from each other. And more importantly, they need to happen in this particular order, with discovery coming before access. Because if you conflate access with discovery, then you will almost certainly not meet the standards needed for your literature review. It won't be systematic, it won't be comprehensive, and therefore it will run a really high risk of being biased. So if we look at a bunch of tools that researchers use, you can see where they fall on the spectrum. So there are various databases which are either specifically subject-specific databases or more general. So Web of Science is a broad science database. So they are designed to help you discover that information exists. CAB Abstracts is another. FSTA falls firmly on that side. PubMed as well is designed to help you find out that things have been written. And then there are things like library discovery services, which are both there to help you discover that things exist, but make very seamless, a seamless link to the research itself, the full text itself, so that it's easy for you to find it. And then there are things which many people use for discovery, but actually work better on the access side. So Google Scholar, I think, is one of those tools that you can search it, but it's not actually set up in ways that make it really conducive to searching comprehensively. But it does work really well to link to full text often. ResearchGate, which is one of the ways where people can set up an account, researchers can set up accounts for themselves to show what they have, and academia is the same, are completely self-selected. And they're great ways to get your hands on the research, but because you're only searching accounts of people who bothered to set up their accounts, they're very, very, very spotty and not at all comprehensive. Science Direct is a tool that only has Elsevier content in it. So it has a lot of excellent content in it for sure, but if you only search Science Direct, then you're missing anything published by any other publishers. Same with Wiley Online or any other journal-specific, publisher-specific platform. So where are you going to actually search? It depends entirely on what you have access to. And the way you'll have access is through your university library or your workplace, depending on their budgets and decisions that have been made by the budget holders. You'll have access to different databases or the library discovery service, usually both. If you are in a country where you can have access to Research for Life, then you can get all sorts of databases and full text resources through that. And then there are the tools that are freely available online. So PubMed is, Google Scholar is. Agricola, which is an agricultural database, is available that way. So you want to find out what you have access to and take full advantage of it. So if you can use subject-specific databases, do. If we think now about the search process, the first step of it is actually identifying or discovering the records about the research that's been done out there. And you go to different sources to do that. And then you go through a process of winnowing or really screening the results that you get. So you cast a wide net at the beginning, and then through some really quite easy steps at first, you get rid of the extras, and you end up then screening carefully the ones that seem like they'll be quite good. So let us now turn to the actual searching process. So when you search, it can be quite helpful to use a tool like this. And it's a way to organize your thinking. So if you have a question, so my sample question is, how does the safe thawing process impact the sensory quality attributes of beef? You need to first think about the different concepts within the question, and the way that you frame your question initially will certainly use words to describe the concepts. But what a chart like this does for you is it then encourages you to start brainstorming about other terms that other researchers in different parts of the world and at different times may have used to capture the same concept that you use as your first guess. So if you look at this filled out, you can see how got the concepts across the top line, but then we go and we have various synonyms and then broader terms, narrower terms, and related terms. So we'll look in a thesaurus so you can see how you come up with these. And there are various ways that you can fill in these boxes. So one thing is just, brainstorming yourself, but then you can start doing searches and use the tools that are available to you through your searches, and also use the records that your first searches come back to work through this chart. An important thing to note is you don't have to fill in all the boxes at all. Sometimes a simple search works very well, but if it's a simple search, you want to make sure that it's a simple search that works well because you know that it does, because you've actually worked with it a bit. If we look at the bottom row there, where it said alternative spellings and variants, this is where you start getting into some of the things that you can use in databases and search engines to search more effectively. So you can truncate terms, which means you put an asterisk, usually, sometimes a question mark, at the end of a series of letters that you type, and that will bring back results for either just the letters that you type, so in this case, thaw, or any additional letters. So thaws, thawed, thawing as well. So you can imagine that researchers might have talked about thawed beef. They might have talked about the thawing process for beef, or they might talk about this beef that thaws. Unlikely that you'd have that one, but you never know. Phrases are kind of the opposite when you put stuff inside quotation marks. They're a little bit the opposite of using truncation, because truncation is broadening a term for you, and phrases is making it more specific. So you're saying that these two words need to go together specifically like this, with no words in between and in that order, because that captures the concept exactly as it is represented. So I would say that one best practice tip I have for you is be really careful with phrases, because they can be powerful in that they restrict results, but it's often the case that you lose results that you don't expect to lose by using phrases. So you can also use in many databases things that are like called adjacent or near searches, where instead of writing food safety inside quotation marks, you'd write food and then N, and then you could put like 3, so it had to be within 3 words of each other. And that would get you results where they were near each other. So it could be food safety or the safety of food. Either option can capture the same concept. And I've seen examples where, really experienced searchers will use a phrase that actually works well in one database, but ends up not working well in another database because of the focus of the database or something like that. So phrases are one thing that I'd always try in different ways, and not necessarily use it unless you're absolutely sure that it should be a phrase. Alternative spellings let you use a wildcard symbol in the middle of a word to take into account different spellings, the American spelling or the British spelling, A or Z. Should it have an extra U in there for color or flavor or not? Or you can actually just write both of those out. So if we look at our chart again, you can see how at the bottom the various alternative spellings and variants are filled out there. But you can also see this is something that will happen in your search process, that some terms get eliminated. So as you run searches, you'll realize that if you use, for instance, meat, even though it really truly is a broader term than beef, it will bring back so many results that it makes a search for beef just nonsensical. You just have to wade through too much. And this search also this chart also shows you how Boolean operators, which are the way that you connect your terms effectively, line up. So you can see with the rows, you have the different concepts, and with the columns, you have the same concept that is being expressed with different words. So each column is connected with ors, and then you connect the different concepts with ands, because you're saying I'm happy with disinfection or contamination. So either option is fine for that, but then it also needs to intersect with thawing or defrosting or thawing medium. So you need to have both of the concepts in your results, but you can have the different concepts expressed in different ways. So if we look at the search string as it's run in a database, you can see how all the or things are put together with inside parentheses and then connected with the ands. So now I'm going to move into actually a database looking at a different question. How does fusarium in grain affect the gushing in beer? So if you don't know fusarium, it is a fungi that's really common in wheat, and when it's in the grain, in grain, and when it's in the grain that beer is made from, then it will cause it to gush or sort of explode out of the bottles, and lots will be wasted. So it's something that you really want to avoid. So I need to move now to my searching screen. So now I've gone into FSTA, which is a database I have access to, and we'll run the search there. So, and I want to show you how you can use the thesaurus to build in a virtual chart. So I don't have a chart to show you with my screen, but keep that kind of chart in mind. So the first thing I do is in Web of Science, if you have access to Web of Science, there are different databases you can get into. So you can get into the core collection. Depending on what your institution subscribes to, you might be able to get into CAB abstracts or Biosis previews, or there's quite a few different options, or FSTA. What I'm showing you here with descriptors, so getting into the FSTA thesaurus, you can only do if you're actually an FSTA in the Web of Science. So I've pulled this down to descriptors, and now I'm going to select from the thesaurus. And that gives me the chance to search for my terms. So I'm going to search for fusarium first, and I'm going to truncate it because I know in this thesaurus it's helpful too. Most databases that you have access to will have a thesaurus, so it's worth looking for it to see if you can use it. And if I go to fusarium and I click on the T, then that will show me it as a thesaurus term. And you can see here I have a broader term, so fungi. And then I have a lot of narrower terms, all of which are fusarium something and related terms. And so in this case, I'm just going to use fusarium, because I know with this database that will search for all of these that have fusarium as well. So because the word fusarium is in them. In some databases, I would have to actually add the extra terms. So with FSTA on the EBSCO platform, for instance, I would have to explode fusarium in order to capture all the different variations. But in this one, I don't. So I'm just going to do it the shorthand way. So I've got my first concept, going to add a row for my second concept, and I'm going to go again quickly into the thesaurus. And say we've got beer, it's another concept. And so we'll look at it again and add beer. Also going to add ale, so that's a narrower term. I could add a number, so remember we want to be comprehensive. So you could add all of these, but I'm not going to in this case because we're running short of time. But what I am going to do is think about beer from another angle. So I'm going to think about brewing, because even though beer and brewing are different things, you can think how the different concepts overlapping would capture the same thing. So, and in FSTA, brewing doesn't relate to coffee, it relates to actually brewing alcohol. So I'm going to add brewing, and I'm going to go to the related terms and add malting as well. So all of these are added for me down at the bottom, and I'm going to say, okay, add a row and do the same thing one more time for my last concept, gushing. You really need to think about which database you're in, how the words might be used. So in this case, a term like, for instance, spirits is only going to have to do with alcoholic spirits in FSTA. But if you're in PubMed and you search spirits, you could get results about spiritual stuff as well. But FSTA is really focused on food. So you have to think through the context of where you are. So I've done this search, and right now I've got it all as descriptors, but I'm going to take these words that I've captured and move this to topic, which means that I'll do a slightly broader search so that I won't just search in the subject headings, but I'll use these words that I found in the thesaurus, but search them in the title or the abstract, as well as the subject headings of the record. So we'll see what that looks like in just 1 minute. But I'm going to make some adjustments before I stop to make them work to be a little bit more flexible, broader. So I'm truncating things. So I'm saying not just fusarium, but I think actually fusarium, probably there's probably not such a thing as fusariums, but beer or beers, definitely. Ale or ales. Brewing, brewed, malt, malting, etc. So I'm going to, with all of these, truncate them and then do a search. And that brought me back 57 results, which is a very, very, very easy number to look through. Scan. I can see that I'm getting free full text for the first two from the publisher because they're open access. This one, though, is full text from the publisher, but it's not free full text. So what I can do, if I didn't have a link through my library already to that, is I can just copy the title and go, I'm struggling to jump to it because of the way Zoom is set up. I know I've got a Google Scholars tab open, so I'm going to just search the title inside type quotation marks in Google Scholar, and I can see right here, I can jump directly to the full text because somebody has posted it on ResearchGate. So that shows you how you can use the access and discovery tools in tandem, but using the discovery tools to make sure that your search is comprehensive. So there's the article. So what I would do at this point is actually look through these articles and see if there were other words to pick up to broaden my search a little bit or to make it more specific if I've kept getting search results that were off topic. So you start scrutinizing them at this point. But if we were to move our search into PubMed, I can actually just copy this. I've got some search terms that I'm quite happy working with, although you're not seeing, again, me going through the whole process that you actually need to go through. But I can move this search into PubMed. And I had to take out all those topics because that was the Web of Science specific thing. But the rest of the search will work. I've got my ors and my ands and my truncation. And hit search. The first thing I see actually is here, the asterisk in my search was ignored because in PubMed it has slightly different rules. It wants me to have at least 4 characters for the wildcard. So I can just change that, ale or ales. I don't know if that will change my results or not. Still have 12 results, so it didn't make any impact, but you can imagine it certainly might sometimes. And so I get fewer results, and if I were to look through these closely, I might have some that were relevant to my question that I hadn't gotten through FSTA. So by running the search in different places, you can be sure that you're being comprehensive in the search. And so I'm going to now, unless there are any questions about the searching process, oops, I've gone to a feedback thing. I'm trying to get to the chat. I can't see the chat box. It's not showing for me right now. So I'm going to actually stop my share and go back to my PowerPoint, and hopefully at that point I can see the chat again. Oh wait, it just came up. Aha, yes, somebody is saying that on Ovid it works very similarly. So it's true. It's FSTA is available on Ovid or EBSCOhost or Web of Science, and they all look different, but they all function quite similarly. Although I would say that EBSCO is the least similar. FSTA and Ovid and Web of Science are more similar to each other than the EBSCOhost version. We do have training materials out on all of them that will talk about some of the devices that you can use on each platform. So if you have access to FSTA, at the end of this presentation, I will show you how you can get to some of the training materials we have so that you can use the database to its best effect, no matter what platform you have it on. So let me go now to share my PowerPoint again. So there are a couple of points I want to make about literature searching. So one thing that's really important, that's a point that's been made by the lecturers, professors working in the field who have reviewed the best practice work that we've been doing, is that it's really important that you look at the historical literature and not just the most recent. So it's a common thing within medical research that people don't look at things, too far back often. They might just look at the last 5 years or the last 10 years, but that seems not to be the expectation in food science. And it's quite important that you look at the longer view of the research to make sure that you're not missing the seminal work that more recent things have been built on. To be an effective searcher, you really need to master the use of Boolean operators. So, and the main ones that you use are and, or. And not is one that's useful, but you have to use carefully because you can wipe out a whole class of results that you didn't realize that you're not seeing. But it can be really useful sometimes to get rid of something that just keeps showing up that you don't want. And there is more information about using those if you would like to in our training materials. And it's also really useful to use the thesaurus to enhance your search, because the thesaurus does a couple different things for you. We didn't see it in any of the results that we were looking at, but often with the thesaurus term, it will tell you that it's used for other variations on that term. So an example is yogurt. Yogurt is a word that can be spelled 3 different ways. And if you use the thesaurus term yogurt spelled Y-O-G-H-U-R-T in FSTA, then it will pick up the results where it's spelled without that H, and it'll also pick up the results where it's spelt with that H plus an extra U. So it does some of the work for you of capturing those international variations in language and terms. And sometimes it's not just different spellings, sometimes it's entirely different terms that it will pull under a single umbrella for you. that you might just miss if you were simply doing keyword searches. And another thing that's really important is when you have found the search strategy that works, you need to record it exactly, so that you can have a record of it for yourself. And often it's helpful to just share with other people as well. And do remember that every database that you use will require tweaks to your search strategy. So you need to record the variations for each one. So once you've done searching and you found a lot of records, you then go through the process of starting to screen for relevance from abstracts. So, and that's usually pretty easy because you'll have results that fit the search terms that you get back. But sometimes you'll see when you read through the records, sometimes from the title itself, but sometimes from the title and abstracts, you'll just realize, well, it's going in a different direction. It's not actually about what I need. And then, and only then, you'll have a set of results left that from the title and abstract look promising, and those are the ones that you need to get the full text for. So you don't need to get the full text for everything, and that's why it's so important that you start with a broad search using tools that help you with discovery, and then turn to the tools that help you get the full text. And then once you have the full text, you need to do careful appraisal, a careful reading to make sure that you're finding results that are actually credible and still relevant. One point that came back to us when, again, from a professor who works with lots of students and also reviews articles is that they say that it's incredibly obvious when somebody cites an article that they've only read the abstract, because sometimes the abstract is not really as representative as it should be. And so if you're citing articles, do read the whole thing to make sure that it's appropriate to be using it. And as you go through and are screening these things closely, reading them closely, then you can also start to organize them and synthesize them. So pull them together for your literature review. And so when you're doing that screening, the critical appraisal process, there are various questions that you'll be asking yourself. So things like, are the aims of the study clearly stated? What are the limitations of what can be concluded from the paper? Is the design actually suitable? And here's a big one, was the sample size adequate? So, and finally, is everything really described in enough detail that you could replicate the study? So do they give you enough so that you can feel confident that their conclusions are warranted? And does their discussion actually reflect the results? And it's always worth thinking about who funded the study and could it have impacted, does it seem to have impacted the conclusions? So there are various resources that IFAS has made available for you. We have a brand new LibGuide that's the best practice guide for literature searching. So it covers some of the same material that we covered today and some of it in quite a bit more detail than I had time to go through today, with the various steps. And so that's free for everybody to use, and librarians can integrate it into their own LibGuides if they'd like to. We also have other resources. So the best practice guide is also available as an online learning module that anybody can download and go through, and it has quizzes built into it. We have database training, so short videos and PDFs, as well as specific webinars about using FSTA. We have a guide to journal publishing, which is aimed at early career researchers. And we have a new service that's the journal recommendation service, which lets somebody who's written an article put the abstract, their own abstract, into it to help find a journal that you know is not a predatory journal, because it comes from the list of what we include in FSTA, and find a good match. So you can screen for various criteria, so open access or not open access, and the various impact levels, and so forth. So that's freely available for you to use and explore. And we also have a blog and white papers that we publish. So some are research focused, and some are food science focused. So we did really encourage you to follow us on any of these social media channels for updates. When we have more things coming out, we advertise them there. And I wonder, I'm going to check and see if there are any questions, any other questions before, if I can get my chat box to show again. It's quite mysterious. It comes and it goes for me. My colleague will send you a recording of this webinar, and there also will be a survey that will pop up at the end. So if you do have time to fill out that survey, that would be excellent. If you have any feedback that can help make future webinars better, it'd be much appreciated. And also ideas for webinars would be really appreciated. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. I've just gotten hold of the chat box. I have a question. If you use multiple research sites, how do you compile and record these in the methods, since they use different search terms? So you have to record them all individually. So you would probably only actually in the methods record the your searches if you were running a systematic review. Otherwise, it wouldn't be part of the methods, part of the reporting. But in a systematic review article, each site search is recorded in great detail. So it would just be an expected part of the article. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. And do feel free to follow up with any questions if you think of them later.